But there's one other point here, and that's that's worth mentioning, I think, repeatedly, because it's why Taiwan is such a problem for the PRC, is that it's an existential threat to the Chinese Communist Party. And by that I mean that...
You say that with such a gleam in your eyes.
Well, kind of, because it's, it's hard to argue otherwise, because the Chinese communists argue all the time that, look, the only way that you can govern Chinese people is with a boot on the neck. It's with force and power. Even Jackie Chan said this, I believe. Mm-hmm. And what about Taiwan? You've got 23 million people of Chinese extraction mostly, and they handle a consensual government, democracy, freedom of the press, the liberties that we take for granted. Well, as I say, Taiwan's existence is a rebuttal. It refutes that Chinese argument, which in fact very much resembles the old, the South African apartheid governments used to say the same thing about Africans, that the only way you can govern them is with force. And it wasn't true there, and it's not true with the PRs, with China either. So Taiwan's existence really is priceless for us if we're trying to take on this very aggressive, expansionist, really fascist dictatorship in Beijing.
Well, speaking of psychological warfare, what about the idea that, the U.S. is an aggressive military power? It has bases all over the world. What's wrong with China trying to break that stranglehold by having, some of its own bases around the world?
Well, one thing is that if any country wants us to leave, we will. All you have to do is say, look, we don't want you here, and we go home. We are around the world because people want us to be there. And there's, and that tells you something. Also, at some point you do have to look at the nature of governments. And one government, ours, is a much higher manifestation of sort of human freedom and dignity. And I think that's demonstrated by the illegal immigration problem we have. And we have plenty of legal immigrants. There's no shortage of them. People want to get into America. There's something that attracts them to us. And the PRC, it doesn't have an immigration problem at all. In fact, most of China's elite would love to have a relative in America with a green card. In fact, many of them do. And that kind of tells you everything. It's sort of the truth tellers that gives you a sense of what kind of government, what kind of system we have.
They say people vote with their feet, right? And so if Chinese elite are trying to leave...
Well, it does. And for decades, as I say, Chinese elite have been trying to get their wealth out of the country, put it into a place like America, like Vancouver, like Britain, Australia.
New Zealand, for sure.
These are not, what do these countries have in common? Well, they're consensual democracies. And they feel that their money's safe there. And as I mentioned, you really want to get a relative out with residence rights. And that is almost like a futures market, where the people who are most successful in that Chinese system don't have enough confidence in the future of it that they're trying to hedge their bets. And once again, this goes to the nature of the regime. And one has to I think you have to go to that point when that question gets asked. Well, China's just doing what we want, what we do. Well, I'd say it's very different. Get China out of Tibet, get China out of Xinjiang, or wherever they go. And the locals might tell them to go home, but they won't. But with us, all you have to do is say, we don't want you here, and we'll go.
Well, so you touched on this, and this is a very interesting thing. Like it seems there's these two parallel tracks when people talk about China. On the one hand, you have, the Chinese Communist Party as this aggressive, threatening military power, as well as engaged in 24 different types of warfare in the United States, pretty successfully. But then on the other side, you have this tract about, the Chinese Communist Party, the elite are trying to leave the country. There's massive protests recently, specifically calling out the Chinese Communist Party. The economy is in shambles. So it presents one side of this really scary threat, and also it's going to collapse any day now. How do these two different the tracks kind of intersect, or is one right or is one wrong? Can it both be this really powerful, scary threat that is also teetering on collapse?
It could be both. But there's a dynamic involved in the PRC and the Chinese Communist Party that's pretty rare in history. One, what I've just described of the elites, the most successful people trying to get their wealth and basically their families into the countries that they have said are their main enemies, the ones they are out to destroy. I can't think of another example of that in history, but nor can I think of a comparable example where the United States or a country like us has actually poured so much investment and convertible currency into China over an extended period, have actually moved much of our industry, our manufacturing to China, have created an economic dependency on the PRC that effectively has allowed the Chinese Communist Party to paper over some huge fissures in their system that otherwise I think would have been fatal to it by now. And the oft-told statistic or example is you've got 500 million Chinese who live on $5 a day. That's not a hugely successful system. The flush toilets aren't exactly a feature in every household either. But the point is that without that foreign and particularly American investment and supply, particularly of foreign currency, of foreign exchange, the system couldn't have lasted. But we've pretty much funded their economic buildup with letting them into WTO, giving them most favored nation status. We've effectively sort of supercharged what would otherwise be a pretty weak economy.
Right. But by trading with them over the last 20 years, we've turned China into a democracy. And I believe that
Bill Clinton promised.
Well, and Xi Jinping says he delivered.
Because China is a democracy.
That's what he's been talking about.
He did say that.
Yeah.
Well, with Chinese characteristics.
Yeah. Right. Oh, it's a better democracy.
Yeah. That was the deal.
Right.
China was supposed to be a really big Canada by now.
Right. It's not only a democracy, but when they vote, they're very united. Like everybody in the National People's Congress voted for Xi Jinping unanimously.
There you go.
I think we can be happy that, even though China today is pretty bad, at least it's not as bad as Canada.
Yeah. Well, so I was thinking about Canada as you were talking about the psyop of reunification. So if we as Americans talked about reunifying with Canada and we did this for like 20 years, do you think we'd have a better chance at taking over Canada? Only
if we got Canada's industrial class, if there is one, or whoever it is in Canada that's the big industrialist, and if they had a Wall Street, if you got those people to think there was money to be in it, then you'd have some success. But it really is ultimately so much of this tracks back to the allure of the China market, the allure of making your fortune.
Right. I mean, even among Taiwanese, though. Even among Taiwanese, you're saying.
I mean, that was something that happened under Ma Ying-jeou a lot, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I was thinking of more of Canada, actually. But
okay.
But for Taiwan, you do have a sort of a class, sort of part of the political class, the society, that wouldn't mind being wouldn't mind being aligned with China or part of China or even coming under Chinese control.
Well, look at Foxconn, right? That's a Taiwanese-owned company that makes iPhones in China and is super friendly with the Chinese Communist Party because they want that cheap labor. They don't want to pay Taiwanese people. They want to pay mainland people at much lower wage. And they solve for the unhappiness using suicide nets. So, yeah, I mean, that's one example. But you also have, even, chip maker TSMC wants to do business with China, although it's harder now because of the CHIPS Act. But, yeah, there's all those big companies are really
that's part of that. Yeah, that's Taiwan and just about everywhere else that you do have the big companies and a lot of smaller companies who are attracted to the potential profits in the China market. I use potential intentionally.
Because it never pans out.
Well, over a long term, doesn't really. You'll never be any more successful or for as long as the Chinese Communist Party lets you be. It's a bit like an advertisement for a casino, where you have a photograph of beautiful people. They all look delighted at the craps table and
I do like.
And you go to an
people.
actual casino and it's like retired people, like, at the slot machine losing all of their life
Well,
savings.
I think the
with a
point
look
is
of
in the
misery.
commercials, you're never getting the returns that the commercials make it out to be,
Or
Yeah,
the
but-
fun.
Yeah.
or the fun.
Or the
But
fun.
the better picture would be at the end of the night when people are staggering out of the casino, looking pretty glum. But the point that you made is that financial attraction is really what does get a lot of people to overlook things they should know better. And just they will ignore dangers that they would not accept in any other market, but to try to get into China. And on the political grounds, they are willing to overlook everything. And in Taiwan's case, there is a part of their business class which would, I think, gladly sell out the country. There's parts of the political class that would do it. Usually there's a financial interest. Not always, but usually. It's said that the former President Ma, who's now in China, is
And isn't that telling?
It really, if you listen to what he's saying when he's there, and it's said that he would like to be the appointed governor of the province of Taiwan.
Oh God!
I've heard that said, and it sort of, I don't know if it was joking or not, but it was only half joking at best, or that he wants to be made a special advisor to Xi Jinping on Taiwan affairs. But you listen to the things he says, and you follow him for a long time. And even when he was president, you had the impression he didn't really want to protect or defend Taiwan.
Well, Ma met with Xi Jinping in Singapore, right? It
That's
was,
right.
Yeah.
2012 or something.
It was very
Long ago,
early
yeah.
on, yeah.
Yeah.
But
It does remind me of Babylon 5, I have to say, but I won't get into that.
okay.